Burmese pythons have devastated native wildlife in the Everglades.
Solution: Florida is deploying robotic rabbits to help capture invasive Burmese pythons. They attract the pythons, allowing wildlife officers to swoop in and catch them.
There is a conflict going on in the middle of the American woods. One of the most destructive invasive species in the world, the Burmese python, is consuming Florida's huge and distinctive ecology. The conflict has taken an incredible turn after decades of defeat, with hunters and hounds being replaced by the robo-rabbit, a small, hairy, solar-powered combatant, the ultimate predator, and the manpower boundaries. The air is heavy, and the silence is misleading in the marshy area of South Florida, where cypress trees and sawgrass coexist. The environment on this land is in a state of decline, and a formidable predator dominates it. This location, known as the Everglades, is among the most distinctive. The Everglades is one of the most distinctive and important ecosystems in the U.S. This area was home to a wide variety of birds, panthers, and alligators for many years. However, an invisible intruder has established itself during the last 4 decades, turning a natural gem into a biological disaster area. The Burmese python is the invader, and its journey here is a tale of both human ambition and carelessness. Long before any storms arrived, the groundwork for this calamity was established. These amazing snakes were imported from Southeast Asia beginning in the 1970s and 1980s, and they quickly gained popularity as pets in the Miami region. An exotic creature captivated people, leading them to purchase small hatchlings. The issue? They develop into enormous 20-foot carnivores very quickly. Many owners just did the unimaginable. They unlocked the cage door when they learned they had a scary, costly animal that required enormous enclosures. In 1979, the first recorded sighting of a Burmese python occurred in the Everglades. These snakes had already begun to quietly establish a small feral population in the wild. In August 1992, Hurricane Andrew followed.
流は勢力を増し続けているハリケーンです。現在、気圧は974ミリバール。
A mass release of confined animals occurred throughout South Florida as a result of the Category 5 storm. In addition to hundreds of pythons unexpectedly washing out into the wetlands and bogs, a reptile breeding facility was completely devastated. In an ecosystem where a few snakes were already having difficulty surviving, this one enormous event brought in a vast new supply of snakes. The cyclone provided the enormous population boost required to create a real breeding colony, and careless pet owners had prepared the ground. It was the ideal storm. Unfortunately, the Everglades was a haven for pythons. The snakes didn't only survive in this warm climate, with no natural predators and an almost limitless supply of prey. They flourished. Their biochemistry makes them ideal for invasion. Up to 100 eggs can be laid annually by a single big female. Once entrenched, this reproductive power drives the invasion enormously. Moreover, the pythons have genuinely exceptional predatory skills. They use extremely complex instincts to hunt, following prey with their tongues and using their pit organs to detect minute temperature changes. They have an indisputable advantage against Florida's native predators thanks to these incredibly effective biological techniques and their larger size. Tens of thousands of these pythons are reportedly roaming the wetlands now, and according to biologists, they are essentially devouring the Everglades. Native wildlife has completely collapsed as a result of this invasion, rather than declining gradually. According to studies, in the most severely impacted areas, the numbers of small mammals, such as opossums, raccoons, and particularly marsh rabbits, a favorite of pythons, have decreased by more than 90%. These pythons are the swamp's vacuum cleaners, effectively removing entire food web components. They are large enough to feed on adult deer, bobcats, and foxes. There are recorded instances of alligators being challenged and defeated by pythons. Their march has caused the Everglades' entire intricate food chain to collapse. The situation is a complete emergency. Nevertheless, it has been almost impossible to get rid of them. The Everglades is a vast, perplexing labyrinth that covers 1.5 million acres. Because they are adept at hiding themselves in the mud and thick vegetation, pythons hunt mostly at night. It is possible for even the most experienced hunter to go days without seeing anything. Finding them is the most difficult task, not killing them. Every official who has attempted to resolve the problem has been dogged by this crucial fact. Because of how serious this ecological situation was, officials had to make last-ditch efforts. These initial attempts turned into a series of costly, discouraging failures that forced wildlife managers to try everything they knew before being forced to take a risk no one had anticipated. A siege of the Everglades made it impossible for Florida politicians to do nothing. Their initial thought was to gather an army of human hunters, since they realized they had to fight back. The state started initiatives with expert contractors and even large-scale public hunting contests called python challenges that offered financial rewards for the longest and most snakes caught. You would see pictures that appeared to be taken from a reality show. Hunters with flashlights and machetes and airboats slicing through the darkness. Although the events undoubtedly increased awareness, the consequences were depressing despite the publicity. The largest challenge events only managed to remove a few snakes out of a population believed to be in the tens of thousands. Thousands of competitors frequently produced fewer than 200 animals. It was soon evident why the bounty system was a costly and spectacular failure. The snake's flawless defense was the issue, not a lack of effort. Because of their exceptional natural camouflage, pythons are ambush predators that are almost impossible to identify. According to one study, even seasoned scientists who knew there were pythons around had a detection rate of fewer than 1%. They inhabit a huge, snakes swim and slither through a marshy maze that people can hardly make their way through. This invisibility hampered professional removal efforts, and the few successful captures frequently resulted in hazardous circumstances. These snakes are big, strong, and designed to stifle. To accomplish a humane death procedure, handling a live python necessitates a high level of concentration and specialized training. A snake that could lay up to 100 eggs a year was simply too strong for all of these efforts, including the protracted, unsuccessful hunts, the risky captures, and the expensive operational expenses. The snakes were procreating far more quickly than people could locate or eliminate them. The limits of boots on the ground forced academics to think outside the box. They realized that they needed the pythons to find one another if the hunters were unable to locate them. As a result, the scout snake approach was developed. Originally termed the Judas snake technique after the biblical traitor, many today use the less contentious word. This approach totally changed the course of events. A male python is captured by researchers, who then surgically implant a radio transmitter in him before releasing him back into the swamp. This scout snake does what he naturally does during the winter breeding season. He searches for a mate. The researchers know they've struck gold when the tracker stops moving. Since pythons typically live alone, a scout who remains still has probably discovered a breeding ball of other pythons, including a sizable untagged female. Because it targets the invasion's reproductive engine, this approach is very effective. The most effective way to slow population increase is to remove a single huge female, who may be carrying 100 or more eggs. In one notable case, researchers discovered a female snake measuring 225 feet, 5 pounds, and carrying a record of 122 eggs thanks to a lone scout snake. However, even this innovation wasn't the magic bullet they needed. It is costly, time-consuming, and mostly only works during the brief winter breeding season. They needed a strategy that could be used on a large scale, year-round, and, above all, more effective than a snake seeking love if they were to win this battle. The early attempts are a tale of expensive failure, requiring wildlife managers to try every known solution before turning to an entirely other approach: the ethical conundrum and creating the ideal lure. The scout snake teams and professional hunters were doing everything in their power to but the numbers were never in their favor. The pythons were just growing too quickly. Scientists decided they needed to stop looking aimlessly and start concentrating the snakes in regions where they could be easily collected if they wanted to have a serious impact on the invasion. They hypothesized that the solution lay in comprehending the snake's appetite rather than adding additional personnel. The marsh rabbit had experienced one of the worst reductions among the several native animals that the pythons had wiped out, according to scientists. These tiny creatures were obviously a favorite food. This led to a challenging but simple hypothesis. If marsh rabbits were already being targeted by pythons in the wild, then using them as live bait could be the secret to getting the elusive predators to come out of their hiding places. They started their studies by putting live rabbits in enclosed enclosures close to water, inside as biologists kept an eye on the locations. The experiments confirmed the researchers' suspicions. The presence of live rabbits effectively attracted pythons to known areas, making them much simpler to find and eliminate. This was a glaring biological advance for anxious wildlife managers. The lure method made sense from a scientific standpoint. Although successful, the outcomes were quite unnerving. There were immediate and significant ethical issues with using live animals for capture. Although saving the entire ecosystem was the aim of conservation, the strategy was not ethically acceptable nor large-scale viable. Taking care of the rabbits in the intense heat and humidity of the swamp needed expensive, ongoing supervision. Despite their need for food, water, and shelter, many of the animals did not make it. The ethicality of using one species as sacrificial bait to save another was questioned by both the public and conservationists. Public outrage increased when it was revealed that numerous rabbits had been killed by pythons before researchers could even step in. PETA and other animal welfare groups raised strong concerns, claiming that the strategy was cruel. There was much uneasiness even among the scientific community. Although saving the entire Everglades environment was the aim, the strategy was unethical and not widely sustainable. The notion that a local species should be sacrificed merely to attract a predator left a bitter flavor. In the end, these moral dilemmas compelled a necessary choice. Live rabbit bait's widespread use had to end. Although these somber experiences were challenging, they taught us an important lesson. The tactic itself was successful. The tests demonstrated that pythons may be lured more successfully by the appearance of rabbits than by any hunter or pheromone trap. The appearance of their preferred prey elicited a strong reaction from the pythons. Scientists now required a solution to maintain the effective baiting technique without the expense, the blood, or the moral dilemma. The new directive became apparent: figure out how to maintain the attraction without sacrificing life. This ethical dilemma forced researchers to the cutting edge of technology, which was a real game-changer for the Everglades. They would use silicon and steel if flesh and blood were too complex. This difficulty instantly gave rise to a radical concept: the robo-rabbit. Developing a decoy that was so realistic that it could fool a predator 20 feet long with hundreds of millions of years of evolutionary instinct was an unparalleled task for Florida's wildlife experts. Technology had to be used to start the counterattack if the pythons were winning the biological war. The robo-rabbit was the end product of a project that took years to develop and was headed by academics at the University of Florida. There was no wind-up toy here. The robo-rabbit was intended to represent the pinnacle of trickery. The characteristics of the native marsh rabbit, the python's preferred food, were examined by researchers. They made use of strong, water-resistant synthetic materials that could withstand the harsh conditions of the Everglades, including the intense heat, high humidity, and standing water. According to lead scientist Mike Kirkland, they merely modified regular toy rabbits by swapping out the stuffing for electronic parts. They were aware, too, that sight was not the most vital sense for a huge snake. The robo-rabbit's ability to target the python's superpowers is what really sets it apart. The engineers looked at behavior in addition to appearances. Each robot is equipped with tiny electric motors that can make minute movements, such as a modest body shift or ear twitch, that might persuade a hunting python that it has discovered a living, vulnerable thing. These tiny mechanical movements are designed to replicate the erratic, apprehensive twitches that immediately alert a hunting snake to a small creature. The decoy has to appeal to the python's highly developed sensory system in order to successfully fool an apex predator. Pythons hunt by using their senses of smell and heat, rather than just sight. There is an internal heating system in every robo-rabbit. The precise body heat of live prey is replicated by tiny heaters inside the shell, which produce a precise warmth signature. This is crucial because pythons can hit precisely even in complete darkness because they have unique pit organs on their faces that allow them to see heat. That signature of heat is an unavoidable biological homing signal for the snakes. The units have smell emitters installed to finish the illusion. These gadgets emit particular chemical compounds that replicate a marsh rabbit's natural musk and smell. Long-distance snakes are drawn out of the thick foliage by that aroma, which also makes the decoy enticing to the python as it approaches. The robo-rabbit is the most powerful lure ever created since it was designed to fulfill all biological requirements, including movement, heat, and smell. The robo-rabbit is a networked intelligence system, not just bait. The main goal is to find and notify the human removal crews, not to actually catch the snake. A motion sensor camera system that transmits live footage to central monitoring stations is installed in each unit. However, the system uses artificial intelligence software because human staff cannot watch hundreds of video feeds. This AI has been specially taught to identify the unique patterns of a python's scales, head form, or slithering movement. An enormous logistical benefit is the AI's ability to quickly distinguish a python from other reptiles, such as native water snakes. The device instantly notifies the field teams via GPS when it detects a python, allowing the human experts to intervene before the camouflaged snake can escape. The hunter's greatest challenge, the extreme difficulty of seeing these snakes, was instantly resolved by this technique. It took clever logistics to get these high-tech lures into the isolated, infrastructure-free Everglades. The robo-rabbits are powered by rechargeable batteries and integrated solar panels. They can function for weeks at a time without requiring continual human maintenance because of their architecture. 120 of these specially designed units, which cost around $4,000 apiece, were placed throughout the worst python hotspots during the summer as part of the first pilot program, which was started by the South Florida Water Management District. Based on years of data collection, they were positioned to maximize the robot's chances of seeing them, close to known transit corridors and historical nesting places. These robots brought cautious optimism to a battle that had been nothing but failure, marking a significant turning point in the invading conflict. The technology was sound, the deployment was perfect, and the notifications began to arrive almost instantly. However, within weeks, the video feed started recording footage that the scientists and engineers had never anticipated, which was disconcerting and cast doubt on the project's entire future. The most instinctual creatures, pythons, seemed to be learning. The first deployment of the robo-rabbits was successful, and they were an engineering victory. Almost instantly, alerts began to reach the monitoring centers, demonstrating that the decoys were successful in luring the elusive pythons out of hiding. For the first time in years, biologists felt that the snakes were coming to us, rather than the other way around, which gave them optimism. However, as the days went by, the AI-powered cameras started returning material that was immediately misconstrued. Some pythons behaved oddly, while others struck the decoy out of pure instinct. Giant snakes were shown on camera gently circling the bunnies for several minutes, occasionally resting next to them, and in some shocking instances, completely giving up the attack before withdrawing into the swamp. After a lot of people saw this video, a shocking new notion became viral. The pythons were learning. It was exciting to think that a plodding, instinct-driven snake might suddenly trump very advanced American engineering. The story of the intelligent python, which suggested that the snakes were already able to recognize the difference between actual prey and machinery, went widespread. This sparked a real alarm moment, casting doubt on the project's future. The field scientists were quick to offer a crucial reality check, though. Primarily motivated by instinct, pythons react to basic stimuli such as movement, heat, and smell. Unlike raccoons and coyotes, they lack the sophisticated cognitive capacity to learn and consciously avoid particular traps. The alleged learning was most likely the result of human causes and basic animal behavior. For example, the snakes may be becoming cautious due to the increased human activity near the decoy sites and the frequent enclosures being set up and checked. Because they are extremely sensitive to ground movements and vibrations, pythons would instinctively stay away from regions where people are frequently present. Moreover, even in the presence of live food, their hunting behavior can be significantly changed by minor variations in the weather or the amount of prey. The risk of misunderstanding in a technology-driven project was the true twist, not the snake's intellect. It's much more likely that any apparent hesitancy or failure resulted from logistical difficulties or a minor flaw in the decoy's heat or scent signature, which the researchers intended to fix anyhow. In the heart of the Everglades, nature and machines now face off. The robo-rabbit may be tiny, but it's humanity's last hope to fix what we broke. The question is, who will outsmart who? Who will